There's something Assassin's Creed has always been really good at that people don't bring up enough, and that's creating locations that just feel off. Not scary in a cheap jump scare way, but places that feel quietly unsettling the moment you step into them. And with Assassin's Creed Hexe or Hexe or Hex or however you pronounce it coming up sometime in the near future, or at least I hope it is in the next year or so, we already know that game is aiming for a much darker, more creepy heavy tone based on everything we know so far. So that got me thinking about how this series has handled that sort of things in the past. In this video, I want to go back through the games and look at some of the creepiest locations Assassin's Creed has given us. A lot of these choices came straight from your suggestions when I asked for them, and a few of them are personal picks that I chose. Real quick before we get into it, I know a lot of you are into RPGs, even if you don't already realize the genre name for it. Collection RPGs are basically built around the idea that you can play as a whole roster. You're collecting characters, you're leveling them up, figuring out which ones actually work together, and slowly optimizing everything over time. That's the fun part. Every new character you unlock can completely change how you approach a fight, and it always feels like there's something to work toward without the game rushing you, and that's where Raid Shadow Legends fits in perfectly. Raid is basically the benchmark for this type of game. There are over 1,000 champions, and they all play differently. Team building matters, gear matters, timing abilities matters. It's a game that's so much more than just simply collecting characters and calling it a day. Visually too, it looks way better than anything you'd expect from a game that you can play on both PC and mobile. Now what I like about Raid is how much content there is depending on what mood you're in. If I want something chill, I'll run campaign or dungeons. If I actually want to lock in, there's PvP. You know, there's clan bosses and live events that force you to think about your roster instead of brute forcing everything. I also just like pulling shards and seeing who I get. Now if you haven't played Raid yet, this is literally the perfect time to start. If you use my link in the description or scan the QR code on screen, you'll get bonuses you cannot get any other way. Right away you unlock Narma the Returned, who's a legendary support champion and an insane pickup early on. Then once you hit level 15, you get Anax, an epic from the Undead Hordes, who hits way harder than you'd expect. On top of that, new players can choose 1 out of 5 promo codes on screen for a free legendary champion. You can only pick one, so choose carefully. Now, personally, if you want the smoothest early game, I would recommend Ultimate Death Knight because he carries so hard in so many modes. But if you already know what kind of playstyle you like, pick whatever fits you best. Just make sure you download the game using my link or the QR code on screen first. If you go straight through the App Store, you won't get any of these bonuses. The promo codes unlock about 48 hours after installing, so don't panic if you don't see them instantly. If you do jump in, come find me under the name The Hidden One and join my clan Hidden Ones and let's play along. We begin with something very unsettling. This location is in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, but it's not in the base game. It's from the Underworld section from the Fate of Atlantis DLC. Now, the DLC has a lot of cool locations, but if we're talking, pure unsettling and the creepiest, I would say that would have to be the cradle of the Underworld right here on the map. And, to be honest, the name alone already sets the tone. Now, for some context, if you don't know, the cradle of the Underworld is a cave. And the idea behind this cave is it's dark as hell. It's said to be a place Hades used to store the souls of babies who died before they were even born. So yeah, it's not exactly a glamorous spot. Now once you step inside, it gets uncomfortable very fast. You can hear constant baby crying echoing throughout the cave very faintly if you take a listen. Now on top of that, the cave is filled with a bunch of dead bodies and skeletons scattered everywhere. The crying starts out quiet near the entrance as you just heard, but the deeper you go, the louder it gets, like it's pulling you further in. And then you reach this part with a stained, blood-soaked statue holding a bowl with a dead body hanging from it. Here the crying is even louder, way more intense. But just when you think it can't get any worse, there's this ladder that's leading further up. Once you climb it, the crying hits its peak. Just take a listen to this. It feels like the souls of these babies are, literally right next to you. Maybe they're in this chest, maybe they're, tied to this stone slab with the inscription carved into it. Wherever the case may be, it is bloody creepy. Staying on the topic of creepy sounds, let's take a trip back all the way to Assassin's Creed 3. Now in this game, we of course know there is the Underground, right? The network of tunnels that connects us across, Boston. But this place is actually very creepy. Now it's not creepy as in, there's monsters here or there's a jump scare. I don't think there's any jump scare in this franchise. But this is creepy in a way that's very uncomfortable. Now the moment you actually go inside one of these places with Connor, it's just you, a lantern and a whole lot of darkness. Now that lantern, by the way, is doing a lot of the work. Sure, you can light torches along the walls, but it never really feels safer. It just shows you more tunnels and more corners you don't want to turn. Now the layout of these underground tunnels don't really help either. It feels like a maze that actively doesn't want you to understand it. You'll see paths looping back on themselves. You'll spot dead ends that go nowhere. And half the time, you're not even sure if you're moving closer to an exit or deeper into just more darkness. And then there's the sound design, and this is where I think it thrives. You will hear metal scraping against metal. You'll hear this awful screech that almost sounds human, but never fully is. You'll hear loud rumbles even at times. You'll hear voices. Now the first time you hear all of this, you expect something to be down there with you. It could be, ghosts, people, something. But there's nothing here. And the worst part is, in my opinion, is you don't ever find out what's making these noises. You're just left alone with them wandering in the dark. I've always had a fear of the unknown. And, in these underground tunnels, it always feels like I was being followed. Let's stay on the same game for this one and talk about another creepy location in this game, and this one feels unsettling for a completely different reason. The Mad Doctor Castle isn't scary because something might jump out at you or because of sound. It's scary because of what you slowly realize already happened here. Now from the moment you enter the Mad Doctor's castle with Connor, the place just feels wrong. There's dust everywhere. The lighting is dim, there's strange artifacts just sitting there like trophies, skulls, masks, these odd decorations that don't belong in a normal home. If anything, it feels less like a manor and more like a museum built by somebody who clearly wasn't right in the head. What makes it worse is the history behind it. This was the home of Dr. Lewis Hutchinson, a man known for shooting travelers from the towers, robbing them, and then dumping their bodies like trash. And the game doesn't tell you that outright, as instead it makes you piece it together. You see bloodstains that don't make sense at first, you see a broken mask, a clock that's hiding a bunch of secrets behind it. Even Connor feels it.
I do not understand how anyone could live here. Small wonder Hutchinson went mad. This place feels mad.
He straight up says the place feels mad. So yeah, I wouldn't say this place is scary, but it's definitely a creepy mansion, and it fits the theme of this video perfectly. You've got the typical hidden passages opening stuff leading you underground to piles of skeletons. Going all the way back to the original Assassin's Creed, the Kingdom area is easily one of the most uncomfortable spaces the franchise has ever had. This is the massive stretch of land connecting the cities, with no missions or objectives here at all. Now, this one is weird because Kingdom is a selection for you to choose from the menu, as you can see here. You would think it's not that special to be considered creepy, but I disagree. What really messes with you is how much stuff is actually out here. You keep stumbling into fully designed locations the game never tells you about. For example, there are literal big abandoned, Roman ruins, I believe. There are these campsites. You'll see a dock where guards are stationed at protecting something, but there's nothing to protect. Even a gladiator style pit, which I struggle to find because of how big this place is. So here's some footage from Willis Makes Movies. Shout out to him, by the way. And all of this is just sitting there with no explanation at all as to why it's there. To me, if anything, it feels like we just walked into an environment halfway through and most people already left. There are dead crusaders everywhere too. You'll often see bodies pinned with arrows, clear signs that battles have happened here. But the game never explains who fought, who won, or why it mattered. Soldiers are often posted nearby, always hostile by the way, which is so annoying, and they stand guard as if they're protecting something. And that's what makes it unsettling. It feels like you're interrupting something that's frozen in time. The gladiator pit especially is the most disturbing. You know, you get shoved inside and there are corpses around, and there's no actual narrative reason for this gladiator pit to exist. And what makes all of this worse is the context. If I'm not mistaken, originally Ubisoft wanted the Kingdom region to work more like the frontier in Assassin's Creed 3. You know, things like wildlife, hunting, side activities, a world that felt alive. Unfortunately, they ran out of time for the first game, and years later after AC1 released, a developer mentioned that the Frontier assets were actually made for this game first, but were never used. So what we're left with is a place that feels intentionally unfinished, as if something bigger was planned, and then abandoned. And the creepiest part is, none of this is required. You can play the entire game of Assassin's Creed 1 and never know any of this is even here. Now moving on, let's head over to Black Flag and talk about one of the weirdest locations in the game, because Punta Guarico Fort is creepy in a way the game never explains. So as we of course know, there's plenty of forts to capture in the game. We do the standard blow the cannons apart, take control and move on. But if you actually slow down and explore this specific fort once you've cleared it, that's when it gets pretty uncomfortable. There is this well inside the fort, covered by a metal grate. Now at first it looks like nothing, but if you stand near this well, you will start hearing voices from people below, people asking for help, saying things like they're going to be left down there. And the worst part is you can't do anything about it.
Is it over yet?
Isn't anybody going to help me? Help!
They're just going to leave us here, aren't they?
There is no interaction or any type of, explanation as to why they are there. The game never explains who they're supposed to be. You're left to guess. They could be prisoners, they could be, slaves or something else entirely. But for me, if I was to take a guess, I always felt like these voices belonged to people who were already dead. I mean, think about it, it's a well, right? And you can clearly see the water has risen all the way to the top. Hearing voices coming from there makes it feel like some kind of Easter egg, echoes of people who never made it out. And when you remember that this fort was run by the Spanish Navy, and then you think about the history of the Caribbean during this time, I don't think none of these possibilities sit right at all. Another location that's always stuck with me is the catacombs in Assassin's Creed Unity, especially when you get down there during the Dead King's DLC in France Yard. Now, I feel like this location is a no-brainer for this video, and it's a place that's very unsettling. It's similar to the underground tunnels in Assassin's Creed 3 that I talked about earlier, but I'd say it's way more creepy, mostly because of the history of the place, and realizing what you are slowly walking through. The real Paris catacombs are said to hold the remains of around 6 million people. Yes, 6 million, and the game leans into that history pretty heavily. In these dark tunnels underground, you are surrounded by literal bones on every side. You got skulls and, femurs stacked into patterns along the walls, almost arranged neatly, which makes you stop and think about how normalized death feels down here. The darkness plays a pretty big role too. You need Arno's lantern just to see where you're going, similar to Connor, which I talked about earlier. And even then, it only shows you a small piece of the space at a time. Everything outside that light feels distant and closed in. It's very easy to lose your sense of direction, and that feeling of being turned around starts to creep in without you really noticing. The sound here, of course, as expected, will add to the creepiness. You'll hear insects moving around in the dark, sometimes close, sometimes far away. I would say one of the most memorable moments down here is tied to a man named Philibert Aspert. The game references his real story. This was a man that entered the catacombs in the late 1700s, and his dead body was found 11 years later just a short distance from the exit. Unity has a whole side mission dedicated to that moment, which I love doing. And finding his belongings in game, his Bible, and his personal items was a nice touch. That's where I think Assassin's Creed thrives. Historical moments referenced in these games, big or small. Let's switch over to Assassin's Creed Origins for a couple of minutes and go over 2 or 3 locations. I don't know about you guys, but to me the afterlife realms in Origins are very unsettling, and for many different reasons. I just find these places to be so unnerving, and I always have for some strange reason. First off, the realm of Hexe said in the Curse of the Pharaohs DLC. Before you even reach the realm itself, the entrance already put you on edge. You walk down this, long dark path with voices talking next to you. It does genuinely sound like they're right behind you, especially as you move forward, and it feels like you're being watched the whole time. And that's just the entrance.
Have you killed the innocent? The weak?
Murder for your cause.
Avenge yourself?
Burned with rage?
Cause terror in the hearts of innocents?
As for the realm itself, this is creepy in a more uncomfortable way. Most of it comes from how empty and off everything feels once you're there. The realm is massive and Bayek feels tiny the entire time. If you have megalophobia, then this place might be hard for you. The giant pharaoh heads dominate the entire landscape and they are very big. In fact, you're always aware of how small you are in comparison. It doesn't help that it feels endless, as in you are running through the desert while all these big pharaoh heads just overlook everything. One other thing that this landscape does that's very creepy are the birds. I mean, take a look at this. This feels like nightmare fuel. Now these birds are called the Ba or BA, and it has a human head and the body of a bird, which already looks unnatural. But it's the way it moves and watches you that makes it uncomfortable. Now these birds are meant to represent the soul of a person after death, but instead of feeling spiritual or peaceful, to me this feels bloody scary and mostly just uncanny. It also doesn't help that this realm just randomly spawns in, I think, mummies to hunt you down, and they just appear out of thin air and then they even disappear into thin air. Another realm that's creepy is Aru. Now the reason this one is creepy is more to do with how uncanny everything feels. First off, again, the same birds with human heads just always watching you, which already is creepy in itself. But also the fact that it's an endless realm of golden fields and it feels like you just don't belong there. It's beautiful, yes, don't get me wrong, but it's also very unsettling, or at least it is to me. I mean, there's kites being flown in the sky, but those kites are not attached to anything. There's endless statues going all the way into the distance. Now I just find these kind of places to be trippy, just pure trippy. And, you know, to end this origin segment, let's go back to the base game and talk about a location that's creepy for a completely different reason. Now, most of us remember the base game story, right? Spoiler warning, by the way, so 3, 2, 1. Now, most of us remember the moment where we dive into the water and find Shadia's body tied up with rope that's attached to a very heavy rock. That scene definitely stuck with you, and yeah, we all wanted the crocodile dead immediately. But what makes this area even worse is realizing that she's not the only one down there. The same spot is filled with other drowned bodies, all tied the same way, still floating underwater. Nobody removed them, they just left there waiting to be discovered. Taking a trip back all the way to Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. Now there's a few locations in this game that can be considered creepy, but to me the Lateran Palace is the one, and it's creepy in a very quiet, restrained way. This was once the home of the Pope. You know, which means it was a place of power and importance. And by the time we enter this place as Ezio, I mean, look at it, it's a completely abandoned place. You know, I'd say it's that contrast alone that does a lot of the work. You're walking through an environment that once clearly mattered in history, but now, if you take a look, it's just rubble, full of collapsed rooms and just forgotten objects sitting there where they once were left. You know, I would say a huge reason the palace works so well in its creepy feeling is the audio. I mean, during the Lair of Romulus mission that takes place here, the soundtrack that's playing, by the way, is the Hexe Underworld OST from the very first Assassin's Creed game. So to use it here was a nice touch, as it surprisingly fits quite well. Also, when you explore this place, there is literally no combat here, but because it's a Romulus lair, it never feels like you're at ease. You can hear faint chanting and low music echoing throughout the halls, like voices just out of reach. It gives the constant feeling that you're not alone, even though nothing ever actually shows up. You keep expecting something to happen, and that nervousness never really goes away. The artist that came up with the concept art for this place did an absolutely fantastic job, nailing that creepy atmosphere. And, you know, again, Brotherhood nailed a few of those creepy locations, and this one to me is definitely up there. I think when it comes to what my favourite island is in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, that would have to be Lesbos. Now this island is a location in the game that slowly changes from you being interested in it to then realising just how, you know, deeply unsettling it is the longer you stay there. At first it's just another island to explore, as the game has many of them, but the atmosphere here changes very fast. The fog starts to come in. The music here, by the way, is pretty different, and you know, the environment starts telling a story before you even do any type of quest. I would say the petrified forest is what really sets the creepy tone here. You're walking through what should be a natural area, but instead you're surrounded by stone figures frozen mid-escape. Some of these stone figures are reaching out. Some clearly look twisted in pain, and once you realize that these are not statues, but instead these are people frozen, you realize why it's so creepy, because then you realize, wait, something is on this island with you. The petrified temple only reminds you why it's so creepy. It's a place that's enclosed and heavy with the knowledge that something ancient and dangerous is waiting deeper inside. I think we all know what is inside. Now, what makes Lesbos even creepier is the quests tied to this island. If I'm not mistaken, very few of them end well. I do recall a lot of them result in people dying, and most outcomes feel tragic no matter what you do. And for the last Assassin's Creed Odyssey location in this video, I've decided to go with the Death Tree. And if you recognize this by name, then you know what I'm talking about. The Death Tree in the Legacy of the First Blade DLC is creepy because it's an attempt to get you on a psychological level instead of a gameplay one. You walk into a scene that's meant to mess with your head. The tree is covered in dead bodies, just hanging there deliberately. And the game gives you just enough time to take in all of this before anything else happens. Now, what makes this so uncomfortable is the intent behind it. This is not some random environmental storytelling that you'll stumble upon naturally by accident. In the story of the DLC, this tree is a trap designed to make you look like a monster. These hanging bodies are the people that Cassandra killed early on, and the Order member that you're hunting hung them up. And he convinced the families of these dead bodies that you did this, and then eventually you're forced to kill those families too. Now, even knowing that this is manipulation, this location is a gruesome one, and it's definitely creepy. Now let's talk about one of the most creative places Assassin's Creed has ever dropped us into, and that's the Black Room in Revelations. This place, oh my god, is genuinely creepy. Now the Black Room, if you don't know, is basically a digital void where Desmond ends up after falling into a coma. The game presents the Black Room like a safe space inside the Animus, but it's definitely not safe at all. It's more like a digital purgatory. The whole area is disguised as an island, but it's not an island. It's really just a safety mode sandbox created by the Animus to protect Desmond's subconsciousness from completely collapsing. Now to me, what makes the Black Room creepy is the idea behind it. I mean, think about it, right? Desmond is not resting here. In fact, he's trapped. If he cannot separate himself from the ancestors' memories, he risks losing who he is entirely. The game already shows us what that outcome looks like through Subject 16, aka Clay Kazmarek, who was destroyed by the Animus and then he ended his own life, which resulted us seeing him only exist as this leftover digital presence. There's also no outside help. Nobody can pull Desmond out. The only way out is through something called a sync nexus. That means Desmond has to go deeper. He has to relive Ezio and alter his memories, finish everything that was left unresolved, and push those lives to their natural end. Once an ancestor has nothing left to show him, the Animus can finally separate that personality from Desmond. Now you do this enough times, and there's finally space for Desmond to exist as himself again. And to me, that's why the Black Room works so well, and it's also why I think it works as a creepy location. One of the creepiest things in Assassin's Creed Valhalla is even tied to a quest. It's this strange, easily missable creature that can appear in Jotunheim during the Asgard storyline. A lot of people never see it at all. In fact, I mentioned this in a previous video, but it's too good to not feature again. This feels like something you weren't supposed to notice. Now, while exploring one of Ymir's bloodstones, there's a chance that you will spot this tall, shadowy figure just standing there, watching you. And I mean that literally. Its eyes are glued to you no matter where you go, and it's following you. It doesn't attack you, which I'd argue makes it even more creepy, because if it attacks you, at least you know it's an enemy that you have to fight back. Visually, I mean, look at it. It looks like something pulled straight out of a nightmare. It's got long limbs and unnatural posture, and what looks like antlers or twisted horns on its head. I tried searching online what this is, and some people think it's meant to be a Jotun. Others see it as a reference to folklore creatures like the Wendigo, or even a nod to, modern horror designs. The game never confirms anything, which makes it worse. And that's the problem. Since Jotunheim itself is experienced through visions caused by Valka's potion, this thing feels like it exists somewhere between a myth and a hallucination. And the location it's in makes it very creepy, because at any point, this creature thing can just appear. And whenever I pass this location in the game, I always have a feeling it will appear randomly and just shit me up. Now, these next two entries in this video are taken from an unlisted video that I made about the weirdest locations in Assassin's Creed. But because these two locations are also very creepy, I figured it would fit perfectly for this video. So here's two bonuses, I guess. If you head on over to this location on the map inside the Ketket Cove hideout, first you need to take out a bunch of enemies. Oh, and by the way, it's pretty random that there's a crocodile in a wooden cage because, correct me if I'm wrong, but couldn't this crocodile just break through this wooden cage with ease, or am I tripping? Anyway, that's not the point. There's also a dead and tied up crocodile on a wagon. There's a bunch of dead crocodiles hanging, so clearly these enemies have an obsession with crocodiles. But most importantly, this area right here is the place we need to be. First of all, you have to kill these alive crocodiles, and once you do that, you can find a note on the floor. And it's a pretty sad note, to be fair. The note is a suicide letter written by a man named Wosa. In the letter, he's addressing his mother, apologizing for everything he's done. He confesses to coming to the Fayoum in search of success to make her proud. But you see, nothing went according to plan. Eventually, driven by desperation and hunger, he began robbing the poor just to survive. The guilt consumed him, and when a robbery went too far and somebody ended up dead, he realized he crossed a line he could never return from. He calls himself weak, useless, and unworthy of his mother's love. And in his final act, he gives himself to the crocodiles. Not just to end his life, but in his words, to at least be of some use to someone. It is quite dark, to be fair. You can actually see his body right next to the note, and it's missing a part of his arms and his leg. But another thing I noticed is that just nearby, you can find a charred, mummified child. The limbs are twisted and the body is blackened, almost as if it had been burned or exposed to extreme heat. And what makes it so much worse is that there's no context to it. Maybe the child was also a victim of the crocodiles, or maybe it's Wosa, but then why would the body look like it's been burned? I have no idea. Now, this is the last crocodile area in the game, I promise. So have you ever heard of the being reborn as a crocodile suicide cult? And yes, those words did just come out of my mouth. Well, if you head over to this area on the map, you'll see plenty of weird things. Now, first of all, it's in a swamp, so crocodiles will be a focus here. Now, scattered all around are the remnants of what looks like a ritual site, a mass grave of sorts. But it's more than just bones and corpses. This place tells a story, and it is not a happy one. But before I continue showing this area, I need to give you some context, so we'll go back to this location shortly. But for now, we need to move on to this area on the map. Now, this area right here is pretty strange. There's a very small abandoned little hut, and inside the hut is a note that reads, "My house is now one for the travelers. Share your stories with me to grow your soul." Now, to me, it feels like the home of somebody who had just completely surrendered to a cult-like belief system, possibly even somebody who led it. Just outside the hut, a dead crocodile is hung from a tree, tied by its tail. You know, I would ask how somebody managed to put a crocodile all the way up there, but hey, explain to me how the pyramids were built. Somebody answer that for me. Now, weirdly, directly below it, there's a bowl positioned perfectly to collect its dripping blood, which now pools into a nearby basin. Whether the blood was meant for offerings, purification, or something even more gruesome, I have no idea. But here's where it's even more interesting. Nearby, you can stumble on what might be the ritual space. A corpse lies on red cloth, surrounded by flowers, bones, knives, incense, and dozens of candles. It definitely does seem like the placement of everything is deliberate, as I would assume it would be ceremonial. The knives are laid neatly around the body, the petals, the incense smoke. It looks like a sacrifice. Now, you may be wondering, what kind of sacrifice? Well, let's go back to the other location that I showed you earlier. Now here, back at the original swampy location, is where it all comes together. As I started looking around more carefully, I noticed dozens of bodies. Some decayed, some mummified, just lying out there in the open. There's shattered pottery, there's, broken bones, a bunch of discarded offerings and candles. The same candles from the other location. There is also a statue of, I believe, Sobek, the crocodile-headed god, behind two decayed bodies, and right in front of it is a chopped up snake, and its pieces scattered around as if it had been sacrificed mid-ritual. Now, I have no idea what the theme of this snake is, so if anybody watching has any idea, let me know. But one thing I can say is that it's a very messy scene. But then there's a note. It's titled Children of Sobek, and it reads, "As it asked of us, we hereby offer ourselves to the great god Sobek. Today we are reborn into the wild. Tomorrow we shall be reborn as crocodiles." And that's when it hit me. This wasn't a random death site. This was organized. These people willingly gave up their lives as some sort of bizarre ancient belief that they'd be spiritually reborn as crocodiles, serving Sobek, the crocodile god of strength and fertility. It's very disturbing and oddly fascinating. When you take everything in, from the note to the ritual space with the red cloth and sacrificial tools to the hut and the blood dripping setup, you start to piece together this twisted little story. There was a leader, there was a belief, there were ceremonies, and in the end there was death. a lot of it. It is honestly one of the most hidden pieces of world building in the entire franchise. Nothing here is tied to a quest, and that's what makes it so brilliant. Now, you may be also thinking that's the end of it, but nope. Nearby is a crocodile that is not dead, but it's also not hostile, as it seems to be tamed. If you whistle, it will follow you, but the radius of how far it follows you is not that wide. Maybe this crocodile is one of these dead people, or maybe they decided to tame a crocodile for the sake of it.